All right, so and here at the EV Route Check booth in every city for Expo, we get a chance to answer questions from the public and also talk to people from the industry that are making the industry happen. That includes people from a variety of backgrounds, which is most importantly for EVs is charging. And that topic comes up all the time. And today we are joined by the co-founder and CEO of Epic Charging, Michael Bakunin. Michael, how you doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having me here.
So Epic started 4 years ago. We were chatting a little bit before we started out. So I got to ask you, and I'm sure this is all something you'd want to ask, considering just why? What made you say, okay, I'm doing this? I mean, there's a lot of things going on in charging. What made Epic become Epic?
That's a great question. So I think I need to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk a bit about my personal profile. So prior to launching Epic in 2021, and by the way, we're headquartered here in Menlo Park, just like 1 hour away from this festival. But prior to that, I spent almost a decade with a car maker, Nissan, from the very, very early days of electrification. I joined the company in 2012 when they just launched the mass-produced Nissan Leaf, and that was the only and the main reason for me to actually try to join the company, because I saw that's coming, that's the future, this is what I really want to do. That was back in Europe. I worked for Nissan across 3 continents. I spent a few years in France, and then in the global headquarters in Japan, and then in 2018 I moved to the United States. And honestly, I've seen almost everything in the EV space, from basic car sharing or smart charging, batteries, vehicle-to-grid technologies. And I came here to the United States, to Silicon Valley, to lead the partnership between Nissan and Waymo on autonomous fleets. And believe it or not, what we are seeing today on autonomous fleets, all these nice cars and Waymos in San Francisco, no drivers, that was, a very kind of well-planned project, and lots of people were working on it, many, many years before they actually launched the company.
It's taken years to execute to what we see today.
Exactly. Yeah. So through this partnership, through this work, I got to know the EV charging industry much, much better, and I quickly realized there was a gap, like there were like some missing points in the fleet charging space and then in charging space in general. So I said, hey, I think I know enough about this industry. I think I can make a difference. So
that entrepreneurial moment is always the best, right?
Yeah.
It's usually when you're laying in bed and the lights are off and you're kind of going to bed and you're like, wait a minute, I can solve this.
So that was the moment, and essentially, it requires a lot of courage. You're living a secure job at, S&P 500 company, which is like, very well established, and then it's a leap into unknown, uncharted territories, and then you launch your own company. So that happened with me 4 years ago. No regrets at all. So as of today, Epic Charging is the fastest growing EV charging company in the United States. So that's like what we've been able to achieve in the past 4 years. But yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, go, Dario.
No, for sure. So Michael, you talked about, looking at the industry and the charging industry and be like, hey, I think there's something missing there. So can you talk a little bit about that?
What was missing?
Yeah. What was missing? Yeah, it's a great question. So 4 years ago, 8 years ago, and even now, there is a big question and a big challenge in the industry, which is essentially a battle between closed protocol systems and open protocol systems. Back in 2021, if you were to buy a charging station, if you were to charge your electric vehicle, you would have really limited kind of capabilities. And I saw this coming. It's called OCPP. It's an open protocol, which actually allows independent third-party software companies access and manage your charging stations, so you don't have that lock-in moment. And back in 21, I think that was just a very nascent territory in charging. So all the big names that you can find here or anywhere else were essentially dominating the industry. And I said, hey, we need more of that open protocol approach.
And what you're talking about is really, again, if anybody has been driving EVs for a long time, let's say they got a Tesla 10 years ago, their response might be, well, I don't really have to think about charging too much because Tesla took care of that for me. And that's the truth. As a company, they really did own the vehicle part as well as the charging part. But for brands that have been building electric cars, like legacy brands, whether that is Ford or GM or Toyota, go down the list, they all had to figure out how to piecemeal the charging experience together for their customers. And what they discovered over time is what you're describing, which is behind the curtain, if you're a driver of a car, you pull up at a charger, you see a physical connector, you expect to grab that thing, plug it in, you expect it to charge. Behind the curtain, though, there's a lot of software that makes all of that possible related to how is the software working for the charger itself, and then how is that software communicating with the car itself. These are all things that people, again, if you're here for the first time at Expo, you might be going, what are these guys talking about? This is how the sausage is made to make it so you have a very positive experience filling up with electricity. And there's a lot that makes that work. And for the longest time, like you were saying, there were these little kind of siloed buckets of people just kind of working in their own world, and they wanted to have people just come to them. But we do need to have a very, as you said, like the open protocols of how do we make sure the hardware and software is communicating in a way that drivers have a great experience, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And so after 4 years in like really running this show and running an open protocol company, just like a few weeks ago, we did a webinar with an analytics company, and they demonstrated that like closed protocol companies in 2025 only have 40% of the market share, so it's declining.
That's still near half, though. That's crazy.
It's still a lot. It's a lot of work to be done, but
Yeah.
I think the trend is there, and I think it's all about educations and sessions like this where we can actually explain for business owners, but also for end users, like how this really works. Like,
It's a lot to unpack. It really is.
Exactly.
And you've been in this for years. I mean, you've seen from different charging networks and how they present themselves as a brand, as a product. You've been on this process too. I mean, you've got to see where the gaps that he's talking about still exist in a lot of ways, I'd imagine.
Oh, absolutely. And besides being in the charging industry, just being an EV driver, I've been driving electric since 2015. And, I want to actually double click on one aspect. So, at one point I was living in an apartment. I didn't have a charger in my garage, right? And, we all know that the easiest way to charge an EV is, should be in your garage, technically, if you have the ability to have a charger in your garage. So what are the steps that the industry is taking to make the life of EV drivers easier when they don't have access to a home charger?
Go ahead. I mean, this is a deep topic, but it's improved a lot in recent years. But again, from your perspective, how do you think things have improved?
Well, so Epic actually became relatively famous in the industry this year for a couple of reasons, and that all kind of drives the discussion towards where you charge and how you charge. So one of it was the topic of NLX exiting the US market, and they left essentially hundreds of thousands of chargers abandoned in the nation. So that was one story, and Epic was the only US-based company which was able to essentially onboard those chargers, so that helped a lot. But
that's one thing. The way you just described that I think is important. What happened basically, for those again who aren't aware, is there was a charging company. Again, they had the hardware and they had the software that they were selling to drivers with garages that could park at night. There were utility companies that were using these. These were installed in a lot of places. And when they decided to walk away from the U.S. market, the hardware, the charger itself was still there, but they basically took away the heartbeat. They pulled the heartbeat out by saying the software is going away. That's where you guys stepped in and said, we're going to resuscitate these things, right?
That's correct. And honestly, that was one of the examples of what can happen with the industry if we don't really make it open protocol. And with all transparency with you, we only took care of what's so-called commercial chargers. Okay. So like apartment buildings, multifamily, workplaces. But there were lots of residential owners, like people like you and me, charging in their garages that just had sometimes just a brick charger. So they paid, I don't know how much, but a few hundreds of dollars to buy that charger, run the software, and suddenly it's a brick.
Well, that was some people that found that. They said, well, can I still just make it, give me electricity? They lost a lot of the functionality they had with, for example, it can connect to my Wi-Fi. I can see what's going on with my charger. It's like, no, now it's just a thing that just dispenses electricity.
And at limited power in many cases, so it just doesn't go really up to like max power, which is the settings. So
I mean, what you're saying also is like for people like me and you driving EVs, finding the port in the wild, right? And we can pull up and have the confidence that the interoperability is going to get us, more options to keep those ports alive should something like that happen. So, it's a big insurance policy, right?
That's correct. That's correct. So, and honestly, you wouldn't really know when you're buying a charging station if you don't do really like all the research. you're just buying a charging station. It has really good ranking on Amazon. Just like order it, it's coming.
All people know is that's going to make my battery fill up.
Exactly.
That's really as far as the thought goes. Yeah.
Exactly. But let's say if you want to have one takeaway from this session, so just check in the product description, is it OCPP compliant? Is it open protocol? So you're buying something, then the software company goes away or like disappears, you can still repoint the charging station to another software provider and you're good to go.
So this is where if I was, again, just an everyday consumer, my thought would be, okay, so what are my options? Does it have to, if I'm a homeowner, does it have to be that complex? Can I just get one that's a dummy charger that just powers my car? I mean, the answer is still yes, but you don't have a lot of visibility into what's happening with your charging, right?
Yeah, and there are a couple of features that typically, consumers looking for in this type of solution. So in many cases, it's charging schedules, and you can also configure that on your EV. But many users just like prefer to do it on the charging station itself, and sometimes it's because of power sharing. They want to have like more confidence that if they connect it to the same socket with a, let's say, a dryer, like you won't really trickle your breakers or things like that, right? But there are some other things. So if you're buying a charging station in a specific utility territory, you can get a subsidy, you can get a refund, you can get special rates and tariffs. And utilities, they're like really smart organizations, so they don't want to use your charging stations whenever you want it. They want to use it when the electricity costs are very low, there is like less stress on the grid. And for that, you actually need software, which will be providing all types of reporting.
Well, we just got down a rabbit hole that is so deep for most people.
It is.
But what you bring up is so important, because if you are a homeowner and if you have the ability to park your car at a garage, driveway at night, and you can plug in, this is lower powered charging. It's going to charge you overnight. But what you just described is there's a way that we can distribute electricity as a fuel from the utilities perspective so that it actually still fills you up by the time you need it in the morning, but it does it in a way that it's kind of set it and forget it, and they fill it up in a way that doesn't stress and strain how they're providing electricity, and that requires having intelligent chargers at home.
That's correct. So, and it's more looking about community and society in general. So if you're adding just one single charging station, obviously you're not really going to disrupt the grid. But when that happens at scale, like in California,
thousands,
where thousands and tens of thousands, and we're talking millions of electric cars right now in the United States, that suddenly becomes a problem. So we hit the so-called glass ceiling. So we really like, oh, there is no more power, and what you do? Like upgrade all the transformers, bring all the power and, generation and transmission and all of that, or you use software
something
to manage
intelligent.
It. Yeah.
Well, consumers just want what they want. That's the thing is in the, like we're in the industry bubble a lot, and I think at the end of the day we have to figure out how we translate this to the public.
Yeah, and overall, the easiest way to charge is where your car is parked. So if you are at home, you charge at home. If you're at work, you want to charge at work. If you are shopping, you want to shop at a shopping mall. If you are going watching a movie, you want to charge there. So the ideal thing is that wherever there's a parking spot, there should be an ability to charge up.
Yep, wherever your car is hanging out. And everything we're talking about, too, really this is a focus on that lower powered charging. That's really what this is focused on.
I like this point a lot. So another thing which we're kind of working on is a partnership with the #1 parking operator in the United States called LAZ, or Laws Parking. And, they say it everywhere at every conference, you only charge where you park. So you don't need to drive somewhere to charge. That's like a broken business model. Like that's like disrupts all the processes in like for many players. But if you park at home, if you park at your workplace, this is where you need to have a charger, and that gives you access to low-cost power, no rush, no extra miles, no hurdles. You just go and park and and plug in.
Well, the biggest thing we're talking about is a switch in consumer psychology, right? You worked with Nissan for years on this, and the reality is in the car industry, we've all just been able to go shop for any car we want for the last 50 years, basically. And the idea of doing that is, well, there's this fuel that awaits me in the background that I don't have to actively think about, but I know it's there and I can trust it. The discussion we're having right now is about how we change people's psychological understanding of how to use a product, which is the car with the fuel. There's a lot to unpack with that, because I think everything we're talking about too is much of it is still very invisible. right? I mean, I forget which show I was watching. It was like on Netflix. It was a documentary, and it was one of those guys who's just kind of like an actor. He's just like he's like, look, I'm not intelligent, but he made a comment about he went to Iceland and saw how they basically run their entire grid, and he said, you know, for me, electricity's like magic, man. I don't know how this stuff works, but this is really cool. But I thought that was a really good insight into how I think most people think, is they just look at electricity and go, I don't know how it works, but it is a product I need. Gasoline is widely marketed and visible, but what we're talking about is still oftentimes very behind the scenes, and it requires people to trust it, and we have to build that up more.
Yeah, one of the things that is so important from a driver's standpoint, you were talking about interoperability and open standards, is the plug and charge. Feature. So, basically, as a driver, I want to pull up to my parking spot, plug in, and it just works.
Juice starts flowing, baby.
Exactly. So that's the best experience overall. And open protocols, like what we were talking about, is really what enables that.
Yeah. And I probably want to chime in with a couple of points here. So first of all, changing those habits, how people actually operate and how they adopt to like new mobility, if you wish. Actually, in my previous life, even before Nissan, I was in the telecom industry. And I think the telecom industry helped the charging industry a lot by developing this habit where you go, you put your smartphone on next to your bed and you charge at night. Then you go to your workplace. If you're running out of battery, you still have something to plug in. So it's a very, very, very similar approach. So you don't really do that like on a freeway with like DC fast chargers and doing all that stuff. You really charge where you park. So that's like another observation here. And the next one is a little bit more about data. And actually the business model is working here. So looking at 2025. Looking at the number of installation of charging stations in the nation, 70% of those went into the multifamily segment. Okay, so if you're like renting, if it's a condo apartment building, so this is where the growth is happening, which means
it's fundamental because
it is.
That has been, and it's a hard challenge too, not because the electricity is not there, but oftentimes it's just red tape and permitting and having someone say we're even willing to do it as a building property owner, where their tenants go to them and say, but we really want this, and they go, we don't even know how to give it to you. Right? I mean, there's a lot to unpack that isn't even related to the technology. It's more so us getting out of our own way to make that actually happen for people.
And nobody wants to be an expert at EV charging, right? If you have an apartment complex that you're managing, it's like, I don't want to be an expert at EV charging.
Right.
I just want something that works.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and essentially what's happening right now is actually a shift when people like you and me and consumers are looking to rent another condo or apartment building. The first question they ask, do you guys have charging stations?
No, it's seen as again, at the end of the day, like we're talking about, it's where you park your car. And if you don't have the option to have a garage or a driveway, you need to know that wherever you're going to live is going to give you that option. We are in many ways, we're the way we're focusing on that, I think, is important. But people that are still going to need to go find their fill up, it's a marriage between these types of options for where the car is parked on a long-term basis, but also having that ability to say, I've got that 0.1% use case where I got to go find a fast charger. That's still fundamental, and then we have to help them navigate all that.
Yep. Nothing to add. I think you said it really well, Matt.
Well, so I guess for those who want, so Epic Charging is a brand. People can find more information about you, but you're more so on the B2B side. It's really less consumer focused and consumer facing, yeah.
It's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah.
So we do our core business is obviously B2B, but eventually, what's happening when they have the charging stations out there? There is a consumer app, and they're all So we have thousands and thousands of EV drivers who are downloading the app and getting access to the charging station. We are right now number 3 independent software provider in California. So I can tell you we're operating thousands of multifamily buildings here in the Bay Area, but also in LA, San Diego, workplaces. And we actually feel the pain. So customers rely on this service so much. Like the hardware needs to work, like the software needs to work. They need to have connectivity. They need to have the right level of power. It's not just like trickle charging. They want like bigger batteries, like all types of Cybertrucks and GMCs and all of that is happening.
200 kilowatt hour battery pack is a big deal.
Yeah, here you go.
Well, so to all that to be said, how do they find information about you if they want to learn more about Epic Charging? Where do they go?
Well, it's very simple. Simple. You go to epiccharging.com, so you can download the app, and in many cases, consumers and drivers discover our business when they actually rent an apartment or they have a new job. They try to charge, and like, oh, this charging station is operated by Epic Charging software. So that's like our core business. So we typically stay behind the scenes. So we power all of that. We don't really run like consumer advertising campaigns, but one day you will, need to download the app and start using it.
Well, a lot of your stuff is kind of behind the fence, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so most people that use it are going to be like where they might rent or have a condo, but they will then encounter you in those moments. They're going to need to know how to use it. Dario, anything to add?
No, I mean, last thing is that, we all try to make this industry a lot more easy to work with, right? As a driver, as somebody who's out there installing stations. Interoperability is not just for, the software and the hardware. It's also like installing these things, putting them in the ground, making sure electrician is actually having a good day doing so, and and not cursing the heavens.
Well, for those, we got one question here, yeah.
Hi, my name is Tony, and I live in Redwood City. I'm also a ham radio operator, and I'm curious, as solar chargers and a lot of charging stations are a big source of RFI or interference for our ham radio equipment, I'm curious as to what extent are you guys discussing how to not create RFI, not just for a ham radio operator, but for other future frequencies that you might need to communicate for your electronic equipment?
Wow, that is a super technical question. If you guys, again, I haven't dealt with that personally. Have either of you dealt with that and even had engineers talk about it?
We're a cloud-based software, so we definitely don't have this kind of issues. But if it's happening, it might be happening on the hardware side. So when the charging station communicates using all like 4G, 5G, then Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. But I think we would probably need to ask hardware manufacturers to see if, I've never heard about this issue. So I'm glad you're bringing this up, but I've never heard anyone complaining, that frequency or this type of never happened.
Yeah, maybe I could take a stab at it. So from a hardware standpoint, when you think about a station, right, they have to talk to the car through the connector. Then they talk to each other as a network so that we can actually balance the power across the different stations. And then sometimes they need firmware updates, software updates, things of that nature. So, all those different protocols are very specific to a function. So when you think about somebody coming up with a phone and authenticating into a station to pay for the session, many people will use an RFID card. Some people will use an app to activate through the cloud service. There's a variety of different protocols that go on, and I think it would be great to actually explore how that RFI you were talking about, goes to impact other communications in the area. I think that would be a great follow-up, actually.
That is, I got to be honest, I've been in the industry for a long time. First time I've heard that particular question, but that's a unique one, and frankly, something that I think is worth exploring because at the end of the day, a lot goes on where we can't see what's happening, but the interference can happen, and that's a particular one that I've never heard of myself. Thanks for asking that. That was great. Thank you. Well, so thank you for those listening. Again, this is the EV Reality Check booth powered by GreenCars.com. We've been having a conversation with Michael Bakunin from Epic Charging, talking about kind of a lot of the. We've been nerding out, frankly. We've been nerding out big time. But this is a lot of what happens behind the curtain to make it so that when you buy an EV and you charge an EV, it just works. And Michael, the work that you're doing is fundamental to that. So thank you for having that entrepreneurial moment 4 years ago. So I'm glad it's worked out so far, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Matt and Dario, for having me here. So we still have a lot more work to do, but we are very excited. So things are changing and moving into the right direction.